Welcome. This here is the 2 horsepower Harbor Freight dust collection system. So what ends up going on here is this thing is used in my wood shop, especially for things like my neighbor used it to pull some insulation out of his roof. There's all this fine stuff, and I'll use it on my table saw or a miter saw or something like that. Even just sweeping up the floor, and you can just suck everything into it. So it's just a huge shop vac. And what you want to do eventually is get it so it's running all around the room and it can suck up anything that's going on. Because the last thing you want when you're working in your shop is to have all sorts of foreign matter and dusty little particulate that's getting into your system that's poisoning you and the efficiency of your system, right? I mean, we all have an essence and we need to keep it as pure as possible. So whenever we're talking about something like a shop vac, then a lot of it comes down to the efficiency of our system. As you can see, we got a motor here. And of course, we got our intakes over here. So this stuff, you intake your foreign matter, your particulate over here, it goes through your impeller, and comes up here, fine particulate here, big chunky stuff drops down there. Now, what we want is to make sure that you don't have to suck all that stuff in here. It clogs up the breathability of the bag. Your system has to work harder because it's trying to force all this stuff through here, force all the big chunks down here. What we want to do is take the big chunks, get them in here first. So before they enter this system, we don't want a screw or something flying in here, taking out our impeller blade. So instead, we're gonna have a bucket here, and we're gonna make sure it catches all the big chips before they go in there. So we're taking a 1-stage, turning it into a 2-stage. There's a couple of 2 stages out there. One of them is versions of this. One of them is called Cyclone. The other one's called the Thein Baffle. So the Cyclone, let's start with that one first because it's the one that has the most commercial notoriety, and that's probably because it has an odd shape to it. Anything that's square, somebody can pretty much make in their garage, but when you start making things that are shaped like a cone, and what happens is vortex comes in, it's like a tornado inside here, all the heavy stuff drops out, all the fine particulate goes up. So the Cyclone is one method of doing this. I looked at getting a Cyclone for this. It's like $250, and then you have to buy a filter to replace all this stuff. Filter's about $300, so I don't have $600 to upgrade a $200 machine. That just sounds crazy to me, which is one of the reasons why you'll find so many YouTube videos on people who are trying to figure out a better way to do this. Turn a 1-stage vacuum into a 2-stage vacuum. The other one is, I think it's JP Thein, I don't know, JP Thein, and he makes what's called a baffle system, the Thein Baffle. This thing, you can actually build at home, and he has all these tutorials on how he did it, and then you can look online and everyone else shows you how they've done it too. So the idea is take that foreign matter that's coming in, that heavy particulate, make sure it doesn't enter your infrastructure, doesn't subvert your the efficiency of your system, because I mean the last thing we need is an infiltration of some sort of screw or something into here that's going to, distress our system beyond what it can handle and break something. The reason we're doing this is on the bigger scale. You remember our Harbor Freight vacuum. This is a central ring unit, and whenever dust would come in here, the heavy particulate would go down, the light particulate would float up, so all the big heavy foreign matter dropped to the bottom. So what people were doing is they'd use a big piece of plywood, they'd cut these perfect rings out so that this would sit on top of this, and that ring would fit in there and that ring would fit in there, and they clamp it together to basically be airtight, so you didn't have to worry about losing air pressure. So what we're going to do is try it out on a smaller scale first. So I took a bucket like this, measured it out. It's about 10 1/8 across. So I made a circle that's about 10 1/8 across. And now I have to figure out how to cut this thing out. And the reason I want to do this is because whenever I build a little platform, I'm gonna have two of these guys, right? We're going to do the same thing we've done before, where you have, we'll turn this into a vacuum unit with what's called a bucket head. So this is a little baby vacuum, sucks in, exports out, and we're gonna need to turn this into a 2-stage. So we'll have another piece over here, and this will take all the heavy foreign matter, all the dense particulate that we can see very easy, the chips, so to say, and this will reduce the load on our air filter and this engine from having to process all that gunk, the heavy gunk. So this will just have to process the fine gunk. So we'll go 1-stage, 2-stage on this. This is all just sort of an experiment to try this out on a smaller scale before we go up to the big shop vac. And okay, circle router jig. What we're gonna do is I've already cut this to the size I want. Basically, to make a circle, it's the sort of simple concept of a compass. Like if I put a pin here and I swing this around, it's gonna make a circular arc from whatever point I have it pinned. We're gonna do the same thing here, and the reason being, well, to sort of get the circumference of the totality of what we're trying to accomplish, then we're going to go ahead and show you how this is going to work. I'm going to put a pin in here. This will be a groove that would be, and this will slide around like this, cutting a circle. This groove right here, we're going to notch out so we can put some sort of T-bolt or nut or something, and that will become our pivot point. That means that our pivot point can go all the way to here, which is a very small pivot point, and that will give us a tighter circle. Further out we come, bigger our circle gets. Not so difficult in theory. There's lots of these online, lots of tutorials you can look up. You can go to Rockler, buy one of these for $69. I think they've got a smaller version for $39 you can buy, or you can just take a scrap piece of MDF, route it out if you've already got your router, which I don't know why you'd build a circle router jig if you didn't have a router. And then you can just make one on your own. So got this bad boy mounted up here. I guess now we need to give it a test drive. So the old circle jig didn't work out exactly how I wanted because I cut this notch too big, and I kind of figured that'd be a problem. So I had to find a larger bolt to put through here, and it wasn't the same kind of bolt that had the knob where I could tighten it, because of course I'm just using stuff around my garage. It worked fine, and I only had one nut that would fit it, and it's this kind of locking nut, and so I had to put a spacer on here because I didn't want to screw the whole thing in. And it just kind of, the little problems sort of went on and on, which made it harder to tighten and then harder for it to stay precise. And then having all this lumber pushing down force on it made it a little bit harder to spin. So then I had to loosen it up, but then that loosens up the pivot point, blah, blah, blah. So I think I'm just gonna make another one and make it better and more accurate. This is usually what happens as I goof around with the concept and mess it up the first 2 or 3 times. So, one of the things I'm trying to do here is I looked up all these tutorials on how to make a Cyclone 2-stage dust collector, and part of it is there's this cone, you suck in, big chips fall down, exhaust comes out. So what I need to do is make an area for the exhaust to come out. I'm going to be using this hose as the exhaust port. So I've made these circles using MDF, and then on my little sander here, I've set this at an angle that roughly correlates to the angle of the cone, and have put these in so this fits. I figure with enough construction glue and layering this up enough, and the fit is actually quite tight, I want to have a way to anchor it to the cone inside here. So I've made another one of these, and I'm going to attach these together so it's a bit thicker, and I can possibly get some sort of screw or rivet or something around the base here. Also, because of these bumps on the cone, I've made another one, so it'll end up just being a stack, and then we'll have a top on it, and then the hose can go down into it. As I've always been told, cleanliness is next to godliness, and I think there's kind of something about that, you know? Well, not that any of us can ever get near to God, but, you know, we can at least keep our space clean and make sure that no foreign matter invades us, and you know, you don't want to poison or pollute yourself. I mean, it really comes down to like a fluoridation of the spirits, right? There's fluoride in our water. Everyone knows that hardens your pineal gland, and then you can't open your third eye. So if you're breathing in wood products and wood byproducts and plastic products, because who knows what they're putting in the glue. I mean, there's formaldehyde that is in some of the wood that's out there. They use that to embalm people. So in some regards, you might consider this a way to combat the conspiracy of getting artificial byproducts into you that keep you dumb and that keep you down. So I'm trying to, like, in the long run, I want to have a clean, sharp mind. And part of it is spending a lot of time alone figuring, you know, looking on the internet, finding ways to make things, and finding ways to use your time that's productive. Okay, so got all this set up and it's working pretty good. My little portable 2-stage shop vac system. The way this works is put a little clamp up here to help hold the lid down. But basically you can remove this, pull this out, and you can remove this road cone and access your chip scraps that are in here. What we're having trouble with, though, I say we as in me, is our road cone is not strong enough for the suction of our vacuum. So you can see what happens here. You can watch the road cone deform when I turn on the vacuum, which reduces our airflow into this area, so everything just ends up cycling back through to here. So that's one of our problems. So now I've got to find a way to fix our road cone so it doesn't deform. Strain off of the system so that you don't have foreign matter encroaching, and at some point, I think one of the key points about some of this is that you've got to think about what you can do on the cheap to keep your space pure and clean. It's really one of the only things you can control is your own space and what you bring in and out of your body, in and out of your mind. And it needs to be 98% pure at least, right? That's the kind of idea. If your blood temperature is 98.6, then why don't we make this sucker 98.6? Hey y'all, been a couple weeks. Had a couple other projects going on. One of them was replacing a water heater. Typical kind of thing that ends up happening after a dozen years. This sucker works well. I've got a couple kinks I'm working out as far as how it's going to attach to the vacuum system itself and how this is going to function, right? You just don't need a hose laying around. Typically in your shop you don't want things on the floor, so there's this idea of taking PVC pipe and lining your walls with it. And this is more infrastructure, right? With the vacuum system, I've talked a lot about infrastructure and efficiency, and using something like PVC pipe. This is 4-inch PVC, it's smooth on the inside, so dirt travels faster, air flows easier, all those good things. So we're gonna put that in the shop along our walls, and that will run into this system. One of the problems we got is this, not compatible. So what we need to do to fix it, this being a contact point, we also have options for these other things. These things are called blast gates. Blast gates are sort of like, you know, it's a gate, and it's a way to keep out anything you don't want, right? Your foreign matter, all the particulate that wants to come in and gum up your system, that's going to decrease the efficiency of the way that everything works. I mean, we understand in a utilitarian capitalist system that you have to reduce excess, any kind of excess matter that wants to gum up your works. So what we're going to do is be highly efficient, plug in these blast gates, keep all that invading matter out of the areas we don't want it to go. We can just close it off, we can open it up whenever we want and do whatever we want with it. Not only that, but it ends up plugging one system into a different system. So it's sort of like an adapter plus a shutoff valve. And when the stresses get too much, system's having too much trouble, it's drawing too much energy, it's pulling too hard, just shut that sucker off, right? So we're gonna work towards that. I'll show you what I'm doing because, of course, instead of spending $12, I'm going to end up spending 12 hours making blast gates. It seems like a good ratio. All right, thanks. So, got this glued up. And got this guy to fit in here. The idea is I've got these little L-nails and they've got a screw bit on the bottom. And my hope is that when these go in here, then the blast gate will then slide back and forth, and this surface will be slick enough that sawdust doesn't stick to it, so it'll move back and forth. The one thing I'm a little nervous about is that while the gate's open, we're gonna get spare sawdust in here, and I want to be able to pull these L-nails out to take the unit apart, to clean out the extra dust on occasion, and then put it back. here's the vacuum all set up. Let's see how it works.